Hello and welcome to a live deprogram with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. Today is Monday, July 17th. I hope you're enjoying the summer and that you're not, for once, I will say, I hope you're not in Texas because it is so hot here. Although I love Texas, I'm always talking about the benefits, you know that. But man, let me tell you, this weekend, my husband had a show in Lukenbach, the famous Lukenbach, which was so fun. But I almost had a heat stroke. I seriously almost fainted. I haven't fainted since 10th grade, and it was pretty hot out there, so I hope you're staying cool. If it's your first time here, this is a live show we do Mondays and Fridays where we talk about what's in the news, what's on our minds. We hang out, we have fun in an insane world, and sometimes I have interviews usually on Thursdays, but sometimes I get to do interviews during one of these live shows. So today we're going to be doing an interview. Before we get to that, I'm just going to say if you like the show, please consider hitting like on the video. That helps us with the algorithm. You can also find ways to support Deprogrammed if you're interested at Locals, Subscribestar, Patreon, or here at YouTube. There should be links in the banner. So without further ado, I'm very excited for my interview guest today. He's been very patient. He has become a new friend of mine in the past year. Met him online. He is a multimedia journalist and also has the creator of Wokescreen, which is an organization that's dedicated to empowering artists in what I'm going to call an age of woke, an age of bad ideology. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Kieran White. Hello, Kieran.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited.
I'm excited to have you on. The deprogrammed audience, the deprogrammed community loves men with accents. They seem to respond well to sultry voiced men like my Wednesday night co-host, Mystery Chris. And so I think they're going to really love your British accent.
Well, I think I'm going to be a treat for the ears today. No,
You
you know,
could do radio with that voice. I love it.
it's funny because I was showing you before we came on. I've got this little, it's like 2001, Space Odyssey here, and I have this little fun thing where I can change my voice like this, and it changes things very, very
It's
interesting.
super creepy. Don't do it.
Gary, I don't
Look,
know what the problem is.
hey, Murder Knits. Murder Knits is in the chat. She says, I love his voice. Yes.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Hello to all the knitters. I see you there. Two Sisters and Some Yarn. Give it up for Two Sisters and Some Yarn, one of our mods today. So I wanted to get into, before we talk about Wokescreen, just a little bit about you. You are an interesting fellow. You have a background in photojournalism. You're a multimedia journalist. You're also a writer. Can you tell me a little bit about what led you to those fields?
Yeah, it's a bit of a jack of all trades, master of some, novice at others, and a bit of a hack at others. But yeah, it's a weird one. So funny story. When I was younger, going all the way back to when I was at school, and I don't know whether it's the same in the US, but in the UK, what they do is they try and do the whole sausage factory thing. If you have like the careers advisor. And I remember being there, and the extent of our careers advice was being shoved in what was called the LRC, which was a Learning Resource Center. And we'd all be put round on the computers and everything. We'd have to do this. I think it was a government program, like a software thing. We'd have to answer questions, and it would like pump out a profession that we might be best suited to. So I got someone that takes people's coats at the door of events.
Are you serious?
Uh-huh. And looking at everything now, I feel like I may have missed an ample opportunity, right?
Did it really say you're best suited for taking coats?
I forget it had like a sexy title and everything, but I think I was more in awe of the fact that I was just there. Hello, madam. Yes, yeah, I'll take the coat. That kind of thing, right? And I just didn't register. But back then, I wanted to actually get into zoology. I was like obsessed with David Attenborough. I was obsessed with animals and things like that. And
same.
any chance that I could, I think it was the autism as well, but I would have like these big books of back when books were still good, and you'd have like the encyclopedia of animals where you'd have all the hand drawings of
Yeah.
different butterflies and things like that, and it would show all these things. And so what I would do is I would hand draw my own little animal magazines with all the facts of all of these things.
Yeah.
And so I was always very creative because I'd always write things. I like created a book and everything when I was younger. And I always tell the joke that I invented flying cars. Because it was actually before as far as I'm aware, well, it was before I was aware of the maglev train in Japan, but the bloody Japanese took my idea. I can't imagine that they would have overheard me talking about it, but we were in a science class, and I remember being there, and we were playing with magnets, and we were talking about how opposites attract and how you can kind of like, hold the two poles and everything, and things float in. And I thought to myself, well, and I think I must have been I was in year six. So what's that? That's probably about
12.
9,
Oh,
12,
9. Okay.
12. Yeah, possibly. Yeah. To 12 and 13 is when you cross over into secondary into. So anyway, so we were there, and I was thinking, well, why don't we? And they were talking about like electromagnets, and I was like, okay, this is a bit more sexy than just these little shitty ones that you've given us from the
Mm.
science department. And so I thought, well, why don't you have like a tunnel and you have like these cars, but like on the bottom of the car is the same magnet power or the same magnet as
Magnet.
what's on the bottom lining of the tunnel, and it would just go straight through. And alas, the Japanese took it and
They took your childhood idea.
yeah, I could have been minted by now. I could have been, it could have been a completely different story. But this is meant to be a too long didn't read, but it's going to be a too long please don't read. But I then skipped ahead, and then I didn't get into music until I was a lot older. I don't know why. I found connecting with music very odd, and I found it that I didn't connect with it at all. And I think what it was is because I was surrounded with a load of like contemporary music at the time,
Mm.
it nothing resonated with me. And though I will make you chuckle with this, given like maybe the arbitrary kind of idea of what you might know I'm into now. My first CD was a 50 cent CD. And it was hilarious because I've never listened to 50 Cent in my life. I never dreamed to listen to 50
Oh, for a
Cent.
second, I thought you meant it only cost you 50 cents. I
It
really
may
did
as
think
well have.
okay.
It may as well have. I'll tell you that much. I remember my friends, like, it was like 50 Cent was really cool and everything like that. And they were into Eminem. And I was like, well, I'm going to get a CD. I'm going to get 50 Cent. It never left the cellophane wrap.
You never got into it.
Never.
So when did you get into so you got into music before photography?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. Photography has kind of been a constant in the background. My granddad was he wasn't a professional photographer, but my mum used to manage a photography shop when she was younger, and so there's always been kind of like a amateur idea of 50 pence. Yeah.
50 pence, sorry.
It's actually £1.20 now with inflation. So um, yeah, if he puts on weight, we'll just say it's inflation. But no, it was odd because he always used to take pictures of everything. I think like every family, you'd have that one person in the family that just take pictures of everything. And I remember, so how I got into music and I actually found my thing. It's a very 80s story for something that happened in the early 2000s. It's quite funny. So I was gifted a secondhand like radio, and I just put it on the desk underneath my bunk bed and everything. And I was listening to one of those like old fogey radio stations because it was like
My
80s and
kind of
70s.
station. Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved it. Magic for anyone that's in the UK. And I was like, I love this. And I think what it was is that's what my grandparents listened to in the car. And so I was very much like this is I think I'm an old soul. I think this is my groove. And I remember just being there one night and the song came on and I was like, oh my God, what's that? And I even like it's so 80s. I even called into the radio station to be like, what was that
What
you
was that you
played?
played? Yeah.
And it happened to be Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics. And I was like, oi, okay, all right. I think I found it. And so I ended up going down this whole route of just like finding with me, if I'm interested in something, I'll learn everything about it. And I was like, wow, this is really incredible. And then it switched. And I thought, you know what, Kieran, you don't have to collect people's coats
Yeah.
at parties. and and I remember I went into the lady, the careers woman, and I said, you know what, I want to be a record producer. I want to do that because Dave Stewart, um, he was, I mean, he's a multi-talented, incredible person, right? You know,
Mm.
musician to the musicians. He's a record producer, you know, director, right? Just everything. Um, and it was one of those ones where it's like, wow, that's really what I want to do. And I remember going down to Brighton in the UK to the British Institute of, is it Modern Music? BIM, I think it's called. And I remember going down there for their open day to embark on doing a college course down there, not US college, but kind of like, you know, before you go to university. And I was going to do it in record production. And there was something there, it just didn't vibe with me. And it was just, I don't know what it was. And I think maybe I realized that I was romanticizing the whole thing a bit too much. And it
Mm.
wasn't actually, I wanted to do something with music, but that wasn't it, I found out. So and this is actually how I started my Twitter account because I've only started using my Twitter account since what 2021. Before that, it was just harassing celebrities online, being like, "Oh, I think you're really good," you know, although not that much, but I found Dave on there and I messaged him and he was so responsive. He'd be, you know, he mentored me with a lot of stuff. A lot of my opportunities that I've had has been his doing. He's given me so many opportunities. And so he was very much like, you know, you should do this, you know, if you need any help with anything. And then I kind of went a little bit quiet because I realized that's not what I wanted to do. And at the same time, I was still, anyone in the UK in the chat will know this, but it's called sixth form. So it's kind of like if you're 18 in the UK, so you can leave the school at 16 in the UK, but you have to go to college or stay on to what's called sixth form, which is attached to the school until you're 18. So you can choose one of those. I decided to do sixth form and I decided to do media and photography. And it was when I was doing photography that I just went mad scientist because I was like in the dark room playing with the chemicals and doing all of that stuff. And that's where it married up
Mm.
because I ended up getting invited. Well, I was shooting a lot of music beforehand, but I got invited to go and do a gig. And it was like, wow, this is actually something that I can do.
So
And then it
you're
transformed.
doing a gig, you mean so you started doing music
Photograph.
photography?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, God forbid, I'm not behind the mic, but yeah, just to clarify. Um, but yeah, photographing and it was really incredible. And Glenn, who I don't know if he's in the chat now, but Glenn Sargent, who is my colleague with Just Listen to This, which is another website that we have, which is a music review website, an interview website, and his late father, Pete Sargent, who was an incredible music journalist in his own right and musician, who sadly passed away in a couple of years back. I think it was 2020. Um, he really took me under his wing as well and gave me a lot of opportunities to shoot bands for publications and what have you. So I really found my stride. I was like, yeah, I've got the eye
Mhm.
and the creative thing for it, and this is my place within that world.
So you were primarily doing concert and music, like stylized photography, and then how did you get into writing? Because what was your entry into critiquing what we call the social justice ideology or the woke culture, or whatever people want to refer to it as?
Sure. So I always say I'm convinced I'm a closet dyslexic. So I've I've never really never really been one to write. My writing, I don't think, is that strong. But so photojournalism has been something that I've been doing technically since I was 12, was when I was
Mhm.
first published. But it was one of those things where I then, so this is a little bit of a tangent, but you got to stay with me with it. So in 2020, the coof hit. I was locked out of going back to New York. I had a plan to start life out there. Everything, it just got cut. End of. I was meant to be there a month after I left. So I left in February 2020. I was due to be back in April, and everything shut down. And as it
Mm.
was, I didn't get back until May, or was it June this year?
This year.
Insane, insane. And it really affected me, really affected me. And and so I don't like wasting my time. And work dried up, everything dried up. And I was like, I cannot sit here twiddling my thumbs for 2 years. And so I thought, well, luckily, as I explained, because of my connections with people, I never needed a degree. But I started in the UK, you can do something called a foundation degree, which is it's the first 2 years of your bachelor's. So in the UK, a bachelor's is 3 years, not four. So you can do the first 2 years as a foundation, which is actually an independent degree in and of itself. I think it's close to an associate's in the US. So I left with that, and no one had ever asked for it. But I was like, wait, why don't I go back and just complete my bachelor's? At least I'm fully equipped then to go into the job market in the US,
Right.
because they won't accept you unless you've got a bachelor's, especially immigration status. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and get my BA in media and communications. I know I'm a glutton for punishment. Um, and um, and I went back, and bear in mind, I'd left my foundation degree. I left education in 2015, so it wasn't years and years and years and years ago. And back then, like, there was no talk of racialized anything. It
Wow.
was a
Okay.
very interesting thing, and there was a whole mix of people in that group. Imagine, central London, loads of different ethnicities, different, life experiences, and no one was political. It was
Mm.
incredible. um, I didn't know, and that's the beauty, right? I didn't know people's political persuasions.
So just in a few short years, when you returned, the
Yeah.
woke stuff had taken over.
Yeah, and I went back as what is called a mature student, which is rather ironic for me because I'm not mature in the slightest.
Were you
But
geriatric student?
yes, exactly, decrepit student. So I went back as a mature student, and all that means is that I basically left the education and I came back at a later point rather than following the full sequence. And I I think it was my experiences of being in the US where you do have the flexibility to choose. Like if you go to a doctor, you have the option, broadly to vet your doctor and be like, oh, I want to look up their bio online and see, and in the UK you don't have that. It's confidentiality. You don't even know, like your doctors don't even really have anything online. So I was very much, I like to know the ins and outs of everything, right? I'll
Mhm.
research anything, and especially with education. So I was looking up my lecturers, and I remember calling up the lecturer before the course started, and I was like, "Wow, I see that you are a traveling fellow at the New School in New York." Which, funny enough, before the COOF came along, my plan was to get my bachelor's and finish my bachelor's at the New School in New York, which now, knowing everything I do about it, would have been a death sentence for me because it is the wokest of the woke. Um, and she was really taken back. She was like, "What? You looked online about me? You read my bio?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm putting my money in. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, it's student loan, but I'm putting my money into you. I kind of want to know, what pedigree you are, how good you are, what your areas of interest are." And they were really taken back. And then everything was online. I think I had one in-person class. And for me, that's really stressful because it's like I find the whole online thing so stressful, so
Mhm.
stressful. I like the in-person.
Yeah.
And so we had the startings of the course, and I realized, hang on a minute, something's a bit amiss here. So I thought, okay, I'll turn a blind eye to it. Bear in mind, at that current time, I was completely ignorant. I was swept away of whatever the zeitgeist was. I was not, I wasn't pro anything. I was just very, everyone says I'm so laid back, I'm horizontal. It just washed over me, right? I
Yeah.
wasn't engaged at all. Um, but I was like, okay, well, this is what it is, whatever. And then things started happening, and I remember like being on a oh gosh, I forget what the course the module was. I think it was creative industry training, and I remember them talking about not reparations, cultural appropriation.
Okay.
Me being me, I'm like, once I get that fire inside me, and I know I'm right about something, and these people are lunatics, I am going to defend it till the death. And so the assignment was make an argument as to why cultural appropriation is either good or bad. It's like, okay, all right. And so I went back and I forget my argument exactly. I think I was like talking about language and how that's, taken from this culture and then this culture. And then I was arguing the fact of, you go to Asia and they're more than happy for you to dress up in their cultural wear because they believe
Right.
it's appreciation. And then I was arguing and I was saying that, well, if you've got a second, or even let's say a family that came over in the Windrush generation, right? And how many generations that is. Well, how far can you claim culture? Because the same as in the US, right? With the slaves and stuff like this that came from Africa, you can't play it both ways. Either they have a culture is something that goes back so far, and that is your one identity, and so you can only claim that. Therefore, how are they able to then claim anything other than that culture? Or you can argue that, as I did, culture is very relative, right? If I go and say, for example, there's a family, and one of the parents are Japanese, but they moved to the UK, and then they had their daughter. Well, technically, her culture is Japanese because of her heritage, but she's never known anything apart from the UK. So is her culture British culture? It's like, who makes these rules of how far things go back?
Yeah.
And then I was just being, facetious, and I said, well, they say that we all originate from this one little point in Africa. So if you're arguing culture can go back, then I claim everything. And
Yes.
I didn't, they didn't quite like that. And then they were talking about how it's racist for white people to wear kind of the tribal patterns. And I believe there was a lawsuit. I forget the company, the fashion house, that I think it was the Maasai tribe, and they ended up using the Maasai tribe patterns for clothing. But then in the same breath, she brought up the idea of these, or the notion of these. The black people that would come over on the Windrush generation and integrate into the UK, but they'd dress up in these flamboyant suits, and that was apparently that was parodying. That was okay because it was
It was a
parodying
parody.
dominated the dominant culture.
They
Yeah,
also have a double standard with their whole, idea, the social justice ideology, the woke ideology, the idea of cultural appropriation, where they much like their redefinition of the word racism, they say it can only go one way. So if you don't have power as a group, whatever group you're in, racial group you're in, basically anyone except white people, they say it's impossible for them to culturally appropriate.
yeah, yeah.
To do this thing, bad thing,
It,
so
it's ridiculous. And I think the thing that got my goat the most was the fact that I've traveled like to a lot of countries. I've spoken to everybody in every kind of walk of life. I've kind of like my younger life when I'd be out in the US every weekend, I was kind of like a mini Louis Theroux. That kind of vibe he has where he just
mhm,
like puts himself in weird situations. I just didn't film it. But it was like I've seen all kinds of people that do all kinds of things and spoken to them, and so I kind of know how things work. I'm not claiming to know how everything works, but I kind of know a little bit more than these institutionalized ideological academics
mhm.
that yes, they're smart, but they're only book smart. and they don't know how these things apply in the real world because they're in an echo chamber. And then you've got the kids, and I will say kids because, at the start I was always like, well, no, they're not kids. That's a bit wrong. But
But you're a
mentally,
mature student, so you can call them.
hang on. Yeah.
I'm a mature student.
Yes.
We did get people say use the voice changer, use it.
Well, I've also got a little one like this if I want to be an immature student.
But it's great. I love this. I love this. I will refrain. I will refrain because I've also got some Trump sound effects in here.
Vagina.
It's really fun. But yes. So I noticed that these kids, obviously, they went through the sausage factory. They never experienced the outside world. And I tried having conversations with some of them, and some of them were pretty successful, actually. But I noticed that they dismissed me based on fear rather than ideological commitment. And anyway, speed forward. The way it works in this degree, I'm sorry, everyone, I'm really going on with this. But the way it worked was you have to do like a final project or a dissertation. I'm creative, so I prefer the final project. And it actually tallied up quite nicely because independently as a journalist, I was looking into both neo-Nazis, QAnon, and the anti-lockdown protests. And I was fascinated. I'd infiltrated a lot of their private Telegram chats. And so I was monitoring a lot of this and I was really fascinated. And I was planning to do this big kind of write-up about it. And my angle was that I was interested about how protests and how these disaffected groups, and I will call them disaffected, even the people that are neo-Nazis, right? Because a lot of them are just very confused people that have been warped into an ideology. And so I was fascinated to see how I won't say the coup because the coup didn't do anything. It was government policy that was enacted. That was the genesis for a lot of these things. But I was fascinated to see exactly how that created a brand new form of protest and how they were organizing online in a way that they hadn't done before because they didn't need to. And so I was looking into all of this and I was covering a lot of the stuff. And I remember before I started at university, I went and covered it down in London. And this is really what kind of woke me up because I went down there. I wasn't like, BLM. But I was very much like, oh, well, I don't agree. Like the cliche thing, I don't believe in racism. So obviously, they're protesting racism.
That's how they get a lot of woke adjacent people who don't really examine what the ideology is. But because the way they sell it is, it sounds very good for any people on the left who are listening, which I know happens on this channel. I understand why people are drawn to, because I mean, look at the name, Black Lives Matter. Well, who's not going to agree?
Yeah,
except for the
branding,
right?
It's incredible, and it's like, and bear in mind, I wasn't politically really that tuned in back then, so it wasn't even a case that I was on the left and sympathetic. It was a case that, again, it was branded, and the media done the amplification. So it was something, and you didn't hear anyone calling out because I wasn't in those spheres. I was in the mainstream.
Amplifies it as if it is what it says it is.
Yeah,
this is a good cause, a good thing to be at, right?
Yeah, it's like a laundering effect. And Shia Sophia, who's here, I went on her channel and spoke about this because she's a scientist, and we were talking about studies, but I was also explaining the way that how a lot of this stuff gets put into papers, and the idea of journalism, the idea that a lot of this stuff is disseminated through press releases. It's sent to a junior reporter that's like, oh, I've got a story. I've got 5 bits of copy to write today. And then they just copy and paste it and put it in.
Yes.
And especially scientific studies, because it comes from a well-known source, that's got the legitimacy factor for the publication. And then the media print it, and that's got the legitimacy factor for the public. And then it creates this big feedback loop. So I went down there and photographed it. And I remember I got cornered by a couple of them and nearly had all my equipment stolen, to the point where we got barricaded in Downing Street. And I remember coming out, and the police. So part of my training as a photojournalist, I know, kind of have a sixth sense of what the police are going to do next based on kind of like gestures and things like that. So I knew that they were getting ready to kettle. Do you know what kettling is?
Mm-mm.
So kettling is a technique. If you imagine you've got a mass of protesters, the police will kind of cut off all of their exits and they'll try and push them into a central point. And then the police can kind of pick them off one by one. And so I noticed that I was really getting trapped there. And I have all my press credentials, of course, but I was like, oh, shit, you know, I'm going to get trapped here. So luckily, I managed to get out of there. But just as I did, a load of them went crazy along Whitehall, which is the road that is outside Downing Street. And they were picking up the electric bikes and throwing them at the mounted police. And so I was about that close. In fact, I think there's a Sky News video where you can actually see me. I was about that close from getting trampled by one of the police horses backing into me, and it was wild. And so that made me think. I was like, oh, okay. And then fast forward, I went to university. Fast forward to the end of the degree where we were doing the project, and I said, I want to do a project, and I wanted to entitle it "The Etiology of COVID-19 Era Protests Within the United Kingdom." And the idea again was to see how, you know, the policies had manifested new protests. And I focused on the anti-lockdown group and the BLM groups. And anyway, done all my work. My advisor was like, oh, this is fine, great, happy days. And then we had to do a public symposium to kind of present. That was part of what we marked on how we could present our ideas. And it was over Zoom, or it was Microsoft Teams, and we done it. And I remember there was one kid that spoke up and was like, you cannot talk about this as a white person. And then all of a sudden, all of the lecturers that were completely on board with everything that I was doing all chimed in and was like, who let this get through? You know, this guy's a racist, you know, shouldn't be doing this. And I didn't know what to do. And then it went on. My political lecturer turned around, and I now realized what she was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because where I have Asperger's, she turned around to me and said, well, you know, why don't you just do a project on how people with Asperger's have a high rate of being radicalized by online media? And I didn't pick it up at the time, but I realized that that's what she was basically, she was inferring.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I had my advisor do a complete 180. He was all right with everything. He proofed everything before I presented it. And then afterwards, we debriefed, and he said, that was like something Tucker Carlson would provide. And I went, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
A compliment, Kieran. I was like, well, okay. You know, I'll take what I can get them. And then I remember I was being told that there was crisis meetings being held by the faculty because there was a huge complaint put in by every single one of the students, a joint letter declaring that a racist journalist should not be awarded a degree. They're trying to get me completely booted out. And it just went on and on and on. And then, but one of the guys that was actually on the call was the deputy head of the school. And he was a mixed race chap, and he was I think a lecturer like in psychology, but I think it was organizational psychology.
Mm.
And so I remember I had to have another call with my two white lecturers. One was Spanish and the other one was British. And the one that was British, actually, she was a journalist in her own right. And I turned around to her and I said, you do realize this is ridiculous. Everything I have shown has been backed up. And she's gone, yeah, well, we've had a complaint, so we have to follow it up. And I said, so you don't actually think I've done anything? What I realized after the fact were they were playing both sides. They had to appease the kids because they'd also signed on to the Black Lives Matter agreement kind of thing beforehand.
Yeah.
So they had to agree with the kids and be seen to be doing something. But because it didn't actually warrant an actual complaint, they wanted to keep it within the faculty so it didn't go up the chain of command. So they done a big fatal flaw because they didn't actually put me through an official complaints process. So that gave me good grounds to basically say you're discriminating based on political opinion here and you know, political philosophy. But I remember being in a call with them, and I recorded all of this. I've got all the documents and everything. And I remember she said to me, "Well, we'll get you to have a maybe do a call with this lecturer, you know." And she laughed. She's gone, "It's okay because he's black." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, but that is the most racist thing
Yeah.
I've heard in this whole scenario that's gone on. That because he might be the same voice and he's black, I get like a hall pass for it." I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, if I've done something wrong, tell me and I can learn from it." And they couldn't do anything. So I agreed to go along, and I realized that this was a struggle session after the fact. I'm a bit late in picking these things up, you'll notice. So I thought it was a case that the kids were going to be there so they could express in a safe space, what it was that I offended them. Because I actually wanted to hear, like, maybe I had a blind spot and I'd said something. But my position always was that I'm not going to apologize for what I've said. I stand by it. I just want to understand exactly the psychology of what's gone on.
Yeah.
And so we went there, and I have it on tape that this guy basically completely dismissed me and turned around and said, "Well, maybe it's because of your Asperger's. Maybe it's because you're a bit mentally deficient that you didn't pick up on a lot of these things. And if you want to win the hearts and minds of people, Kieran, you have to tailor your message to people in front of you." And I don't know where it came from, but I just literally came out with a line that I'll never forget. And I said, "I don't intend to win the hearts and minds of people. I intend to do justice to the truth, and I will not tailor my message and bastardize the truth to tailor to ignorant people in the audience to cater to different ideologies." And he's
Yeah.
gone, "Well, you're not going to get very far doing that."
You're not going to get very far with the
Yeah,
truth, Kieran.
exactly. And I don't mind whether I'm shouting to myself in a room by myself, as long as I know it's true, that's all that matters.
Yes. Yes.
And so it went on, and then I ended up going to the Free Speech Union in the UK. They ended up sending a letter to them saying that they have a legal obligation to, allow me my academic freedom. And then they backed down a little bit. They got really shirty and like really weird with a lot of stuff, and they were playing weird with my marking. And then I remember I was asked for permission because I think my story was included in a dossier that went to the House of Lords as part of a landmark bit of legislation to protect a lot of these things. But I had the last laugh because I came back with my final summary write up of my project, and I got away with citing James Lindsay probably 20 times. And I was able to put in there that Black Lives Matter is nothing more than a neo-Marxian conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And they had to give me a first class honours.
Wow.
So I didn't
Uh,
back
you,
down.
that's great. You just stood by the truth.
Yeah. It was almost like the only image, because I work on visuals, and the only visual I can equate this to is like, when Luke Skywalker is going, with the Death Star and they're going in with the lasers. I kind of like took it to the mothership, and I didn't back down. I was like, I could have crashed my ship at any which way, but eyes on the prize. And yeah, and it's funny, there was a point. Yeah, carry on.
Oh no, you go ahead. I was just going to
Well,
make
I was just gonna wrap it up by saying that there was a point where I was gonna come out with everything, and I've been flip flopping on this. I mean, it's been a couple of years, so I'm kind of like, well, let sleeping dogs sleep, kind of thing. And but there was a point where I was going to come out with everything, and then I walked away and I was like, well, what purpose does it have for me to come out with my niche story of my niche university talking about my niche lecturers? And I thought, if I'm going to do it, I need to come out with a bigger narrative here, i.e., lift above like what happened, what individual people said, but give a message about how by standing by what you know is right as a student. I mean, again, I was an oddball because I had the confidence of knowing how the world works. I can
Yes.
understand as a kid that's early 20s that have just left school, you still have that authority complex where a teacher is not to be spoken to
This
in
is
any.
why they're trying to get it into younger and younger education, I
Yeah,
mean, it worked on me. I picked it up in college at that age,
yeah,
early, what was that, 17 to 21, that
Yeah.
age. But you're very impressionable still. But that's not enough for them even. That's why you see it in primary education now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because in the UK and the US, obviously the educational system works different. I mean, ours is the curriculum is centrally controlled from the government. And then, but in the US, obviously it's it's mainly states control the education curriculum. But in the UK, it's very, very hard to really understand what the kids are being taught, because where it's the curriculum that you'll find online in the UK is very much like, the basics, and they give a framework, but each school can pivot from that and educate in whatever way they want, as long as they're adhering to the core curriculum. They can do certain things. And the other thing as well is that we're very non-interventionalist with our own lives here.
Right.
We leave it to the nanny state, and it frustrated me because with people I know that I was with, with health problems in the US, and I'd be there in the US going to doctor's appointments and helping them with things, or if I'd have to go to the doctors while I was in the US, it was so refreshing to be able to have that control. And I noticed when I was there, they spoke to you. Oh, sorry, they spoke with you rather than at you. Here, it's at you. And you don't have control over your medical things. You don't have control over the educational things. And the parents don't really have that inclination of they should be proactive. It's a case of, well, they're at school, it's all fine.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now is we're seeing all these curriculums being leaked, whereas kids as young as 4 are being told about, about racism and sort of Black Lives Matter stuff and things like this. And people are up in uproar with it. But it's like, well, yes, but you need to be proactive with this stuff.
Yeah. I just have a couple of funny comments from the chat I wanted to run by you to lighten the mood a bit. Somebody asked, what was that word you used? I was wondering too. Shirty? Shirtsy?
Oh, they're getting shirty.
Shirty. What is that?
I don't know. Let's have a look very quickly. It's an English. I think it's a Britishism. Shirty.
Shirty. Is that like dirty but extra dirty?
No, it's kind of like so it says here, ill-tempered or angry.
Oh, what a great word.
The only way I can think is like, when you get the guys out of the pubs and they're kind of like that with their shirt and things like that. Or
okay.
I don't know. I'm making that up on the top. Yeah, stroppy. Like they're getting stroppy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Now I want to find the etymology of that word.
The other thing is, when you're telling this tale of it's a very common story to anyone who's been following what's been happening in culture the past few years, just this story of the social justice ideology, this bullying mentality, the piling on, the attempted cancellation, the fallacy, this authority fallacy of, we know what's best. But because it's a British story, there are funny little things like that you had in there, like shirty and what was the other one?
It's like a story from
when you said that it made it to the House of Lords. The House of Lords, as an American, we just imagine lords leaping like from, it just sounds
I'm sure there were many lords leaping over this one.
We don't have a House of Lords.
No, the House of Lords, the only way to describe it is we have kind of 2 chambers in the UK. So we'll have the House of the Parliament and then the House of Lords. So I guess the equivalent would be, the Parliament is, the House of Representatives, and the Lords is kind of like the Senate.
Okay.
That's a very loose equation.
Okay, the House of Lords. Thank you for clearing that part up for me.
And they're not elected either. They get bestowed from prime ministers and other things when they leave office.
This all sounds like fairy tale to those of us in the States.
Like, you don't have to do anything. I think you collect over £200 just for signing in. So you can go there, get your breakfast, and leave, and you've collected £200 for the day's work.
Do they wear those white powdery wigs?
They do in state events.
Okay.
When the state opening of Parliament, but generally speaking, half of them are just old people that you probably better check their pulse because they just use it as a glorified nap.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was your awakening into the social justice ideology, how it's sort of, in my opinion, taken over the world. It's become the dominant belief system, ideology, however you want to refer to it. And I always like to thank you for telling us that, because I like to figure out how people came into contact with my old belief system, and I view it sometimes as one of my favorite kind of horror films is, or I love zombie films, and my favorite part of those films is when people first realize the world has changed,
Mm-hmm.
that things are different,
Yeah.
very different, and so that's kind of the story you just told us. Is like, this is how I learned there's a
It was a
zombie
little bit
outbreak
of
going
verbal
on.
diarrhea, but I hope you guys got the backbone of
Yeah.
of everything.
So tell us about Wokescreen, and I've got a video pulled up here. Maybe we can start with this, actually. Let's take a little break. I'm going to show this, and then you can tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Wokescreen.
Yeah.
So
And
Kieran's
I'll
here.
explain why I done these videos as well after.
Okay. So Kieran's here, got a presence here on YouTube. He's also on Locals and Twitter, and we've got links below in the description. One of the best things I think you're doing that I've seen is you're doing these short videos called Wokesplain, where you're attempting to, in a concise way, help explain different facets, different parts of my old belief system, the social justice belief system, which is most often called woke these days. So we're going to watch a bit of one, and they're short, they're easily digestible. I think they're just great. So you guys can find Kieran's channel below if you want to see more of these. But here, we're going to do this one. What is critical race theory? I'm going to pause it right there on the screen, because this is I'm so glad you've included this in such concise little nuggets. But this part is, I think, one of the most important parts, that they will sometimes say it outright, and then other times they completely deny that this is what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
But here on the screen, you have a quote from Ibram X. Kendi from his book How to Be an Anti-Racist, which anecdotally, I happen to know, for a lot of especially white female new believers in the social justice ideology, this was a huge book. They're always recommending it. They're always referencing it. It's at all the woke libraries. It's right there on the display. This is the book to get if you're a good person. Think of it like the Bible, but for social justice, and they'll buy copies and pass it out, right? So here's a quote from that book that you have on the screen. He says, "The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination," which, think about what that means. They use that word anti-racist to describe racism. They do. But even if you're woke and you're listening to this and you don't agree with me, just think about what he's saying. He's outright saying to cure discrimination, you have to use a kind of discrimination. That's what you have to do. And then he continues, the only remedy to pass, in case you're confused, he continues, the only remedy to pass discrimination is present discrimination. He's saying we can cure discrimination with discrimination. We can cure racism with a different kind of racism.
It is two wrongs make a right to him.
Yes, two wrongs make a right. The only remedy, he continues, the only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. So it's basically a world of discrimination all the way down. We just continue discriminating because you've always got some discrimination to cure with more discrimination. It never ends. It never ends. And I love it when they are this open, because a lot of the times they will deny this, but this is the basis of social justice and woke, my old belief system of what I think makes it so inherently evil, is because they are implanting in young minds the idea that racism is okay to cure racism. If it's done with good intent, that sexism is okay to cure sexism, that if you have a good intent, that your just ends will, your very good ends will justify the means. And that's just untrue. You don't fix racism with racism. You don't fix discrimination with discrimination. And if you look at what he's saying there's no end in sight, because he's saying past discrimination, fix it with present discrimination. Present discrimination, well, we fix that later with future discrimination. And you just keep going.
Yeah. And everything is a pendulum, right? Everything will find its equilibrium. And at the end of the day, they just so short-sighted, because this will fuel the equal and opposite reaction, right? And it'll just be, and the whole thing for this is, when you zoom far out from, all these critical theories, the whole point here is to find vectors of separation, fractures in the fabric of society. Not to rehash what everybody already knows, but obviously, the Frankfurt School were miffed as to why the revolution didn't happen it didn't happen in London and places like that. It happened in the backwaters in the Agrarian backwaters of Russia. And so they were like, okay. And then they realized, well, maybe the UK isn't the best place. Let's maybe do it in the US, but let's find a different tool. Well, class isn't going to work, so we'll find race or gender and all of these different things. And the analogy that I give, I think I've given it on a previous stream here. The way I look at it, it's like a mechanic. You bring in a car, and you say to the mechanic, there's something wrong with it. I don't know what's wrong. And so that could be just something in society that's wrong. The mechanic is the critical theorist, and each one of his tools in his box is a different critical theory. And what they do is they don't have any idea of how to diagnose the problem. They'll go, I'll use a wrench, gender theory. Oh no, that doesn't work. I'll use a hammer. Okay, critical race theory. And they'll use all of these different things until they find something that actually diagnoses a problem or tries to sort a problem. But it's not really trying to solve a problem at all. But that's the kind of thing. It's critical theory, and all of its offshoots are tools within a box that they use to try and dismantle everything and find fractures to which they can exploit. This is the whole thing. It's all about making people into these little tribal communities, whether it be politically or emotionally or just everything, because it's divide and conquer. That's the very easy.
And that does two things. When you divide us, and when an ideology divides us into all of these tribal communities, it keeps us, as you just said, it's antagonistic. It keeps us at each other's throats. So it's a distraction from any real progress because there are these divisions that can be exploited. And number two, it's easier to manipulate. If a person is beholden to a group identity
Mhm.
instead of to individualism, if they're beholden to this collectivist way of thinking and like, I am with this tribe, it's easier to say, well, hey, this tribe is doing this. This
Yeah,
tribe believes this. And we saw that in the past few years with the COVID policy, how easy it was to manipulate people once they came in and said, hey, this is what the right thinks about COVID policy. This is what the left thinks. And it's like, no, that's
yeah,
not naturally what the right was thinking or the left was thinking. There were a lot of outliers. You know, a lot of people on the left were opposed to COVID policy at the beginning. A lot of the original protests were from people on the left.
yeah.
But then they're like, nope, fall in with the tribe, easily manipulated people.
And I think that's the reason I done these videos, because what I've noticed is my whole kind of modus operandi with a lot of this stuff is I want to take the temperature down. I'm not in the business of stoking even more hatred, or
Mhm.
making people's cortisol levels peak even higher. There's enough of that. And I mean, there's another video that I did here. I mean, even the drag show one. The drag show is a very nuanced video where I talk about pantomime, and I talk about the difference, and I make it very clear the difference, because that's one of the arguments, right? Well, especially in the UK, like I was brought up every year going to a Christmas pantomime where
Mhm.
the dame would be a bloke dressed up in women's clothing, and they might make some inappropriate jokes for the adult audience there that
Mhm.
would go over the kid's head. And that would be like, well, you're happy for kids to be, dressed up, because they do it around they do it around the visuals. Whereas my argument is the difference between pantomime or that kind of thing, or even like Mrs. Doubtfire is a thing that's brought up as a comparison. It's like, well, so you're not happy with men dressing up as women and doing story time, but you're happy with Mrs. Doubtfire. Well, yes, the reason is because the drag time story hour and things like that, it's the ideology. It's not necessarily how they look, because
It's
some of
what they're
them,
pushing with it.
exactly, because some of them do look as respectful as you can look when you're in full drag and things like that. But some of them aren't, with their tits hanging out and, spreading their legs and everything. Some of them are like in big kind of like over the top princessy dresses and things like that with a ton of makeup on.
Mhm.
But it's not that. There's no place for that when you're a kid, because drag is a very specific adult thing. And so that's where I draw the line. The difference is because pantomime and acting like Mrs. Doubtfire and things, that doesn't come with the baggage of the ideology.
Right.
Um,
And
and
nobody had a problem with, yes. Are there individuals who had a problem? Sure. With drag before this? Yes. But when I say nobody, I mean in general, culturally, there wasn't a problem with drag until they started using it to target kids as a vehicle to target children to push social justice.
and I think
That
this is the thing, and this is the thing that I really feel passionately about. And when I do because obviously I have the crowdsourced podcast that I do live every Saturday, and so what I'll do is I'll do the show. I'll cover 3 stories, and then throughout the week I'll post clips of those stories so people can see actually what they're interested in. And there was one story that really took off, and I'm glad it did, because it was an important story, but it made me reflect a lot, because I've only had my YouTube account running for 2 months. And, I'm not one to boast, but
Oh,
it's,
you're doing great for 2 months.
I don't know. I don't know. And from a marketing background, it frustrates me. Views don't mean anything to me if I can't work out where they've come from, because I can't replicate it or work out how it's happened. But anyway, I done a story that had been missed because the submersible thing was taking news stories.
Mm,
And it was the story that I think it was in Boston. There were 4 kids that were rescued from a house after a call had been made to emergency services, because I think there were 6 men in women's clothing in this apartment, and one of them was dead. And when the firefighter went in, he found these 4 children I think between 4 and 6 in a back room with another one of these men
Wow.
with drag clothes and everything like that. And so the way I tackle these stories is I don't do what other people will do, where it's like, look at these trans people. I like to look at it from a bigger picture. And so my focus there was on the language, because the media reports, the original local reporting, was saying that they were cross-dressing men. That's
Okay.
important. Then it went to the national news in the US, and they were trans women.
Okay.
And then it went to the Democrat leaders of the state, and they were all calling them women. And so I was talking, because I do a lot around language and media manipulation of language. And so I was doing that. But anyway, that took off, and it's had, I think, about 8,000 views as we speak. And I noticed in the comment, it made me reflect a lot, because a lot of people were going, this is what happens with all of this LGBTQ. And I kept commenting back to people, and I said, no, you're getting it wrong. It's not LGBTQ, or forget the Q, that's another package, but the LGBT people, because the people that are doing this are people coming in and using any kind of vehicle they can, and they're parasitic. They find anything they can latch onto, so they go in there to steer it in certain ways. They're not part of that. I don't like community, because individuals are individuals. There isn't a community, because they're not all robots. But you get what I mean, just for a colloquialism for that phrase.
Gary uses the word fellowship.
Fellowship of the gays, yes.
House of Lords.
Yeah. Not I, Your Honor, not I. But yeah, I really did want to push back, and I will always do this, because for a long time watching, I'm a small L libertarian, meaning that, I'm not an ideologue, right? I can see nuances in things. I can see failings in libertarian ideology. I can see failings in all ideologies, but that's the closest that I align with. But by seeing this and seeing the stuff on the right and seeing the stuff on the left, I'm noticing that, that the situation that the gay community were in back in the day, when they were really, really pushed to the fringes, this is going to come back again and bite them in the arse again.
I'm afraid you may be right, and I hope you're wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I do think there is a backlash brewing, and many people who are in this sphere of paying attention to and talking about culture and talking about this woke ideology and the stage that we're at now, have noticed that there tends to be a backlash brewing. It's that Newton's third law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And
Biden turning up.
What's happening? Your
Can you
phone?
hear that?
What is that?
It's the ice cream truck.
Oh.
It's Biden turning up.
Come on, man.
You've got an ice cream truck how quaint and cute.
It's not really. I went out. Well, I looked out the window one day and I was like, I'm going to have a Mr. Whippy. That isn't a euphemism. That's the name of a thing. And I saw the guy picking his nose as he was going for the corner.
No, stop! I don't want to hear it.
I don't want sprinkles. Anyway, carry on. I distracted.
No. Well, before we started, guys, I told Kieran, I was like, oh, well, we usually start 5 minutes late because we have a town siren. And then I was like, wait, that's not a euphemism. Yeah, we have a town siren, and her name is no, it's very quaint. We have a siren that goes off every day right at the time my podcast starts at noon.
We just have an ice cream truck.
Yeah. We need to get one of those. But no, I was saying, I do think there's unfortunately a potential backlash brewing, and a lot of people who are in, who are gay and lesbian, and even a lot of trans people I know who they're very aware of this, that there seems to be a growing lumping of everyone all together, into, like you mentioned, these tribes. And so people who are, because so much of the woke, the social justice movement, and the the activists who claim to speak on behalf of
Yeah.
the LGBTQI whatever community have done such a great job of trying to lump everyone in together and say, we speak on behalf of this tribe. It is a tribe. And so because of that, you're seeing people who have problems with the woke part of it reacting, I think, negatively against an entire group of people.
It's
And I think,
ignorance. It's
yeah, and
ignorance.
that's a mistake because
Yeah.
that's falling into what they want you to do, which is like divide people up into groups and say this group is like this group is like this, and they're not. Those people, those woke activists, they don't speak for gay and lesbian or even trans people any more than they speak for women
No.
or, you know, black people, or they don't speak for us.
No.
So
It does. It really does concern me. But that's the thing. It's, you know, I wanted to make that point with things because, you know, the woke. I done a video as well. What is woke? So that to bring anyone back to this. So basically, these are bits of content that I'm doing that are what I call cornerstone content. So from a business point of view, I look at them as evergreen because I think that there's something that will stand the test of time. They're not time sensitive, so it's good to
yes,
have a content wise. But also from he's off
it's
again.
fine.
I think Jill's driving. But then the other thing that I think about is that these are so necessary that if you want to send them to a friend, you know,
That's what I like about them.
yeah, I'm getting a lot of comments from people, you know, and this is what I'm loving. I'm getting people that are on the left commenting under my video. That video, the one that's got 8,000 views, the way I do things from a marketing point of view, I do a hyperbolic title and a thumbnail, and then I get you in there and I give you a very nuanced opinion. And because it's the whole thing I advise people when I kind of advise them on stuff, you know, it's a bit like when you've got a kid that doesn't want to eat their veggies. You need to hide them under something. You need to make it look really good, but make it nutritionally dense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I do things. So it's really interesting because I got people going on to this video that would probably appeal to more of a kind of a hard right kind of audience. But I was getting Democrats on there going, thank you so much for this. Thank you for reporting. Someone actually posted an update and said it was an update that discredited some of the story. I posted that as a correction. He was like, wow, you know, I don't get this from anyone. No one posts a correction that goes against what they've said. And it's like, well, I'm here for the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really important to do this. The woke one I done is a little bit controversial because when you turn around someone and say, what does woke mean? They'll say, well, it means, and they'll go on the whole ideology of the social justice ideology. But the argument I make that woke has two definitions, like most words. They have the formal definition and the colloquial definition, and also the man on the street definition.
Mm-hmm.
And so woke does mean alert to racial injustice. That's how it was born. So you have to give it some credence as to that. That was the intent of that word. But then I go on to explain that actually that's how it applies in academic work and kind of like on the left, and that's how they apply it. But on the right, it is used as a catch-all, as a colloquialism for anything that we don't like. So we use that and brand everything under woke, whereas things might be better, maybe I'm just a bit anal with language, but something
Mm-hmm.
might be more precisely attributed to, you know, queer theory or, you know, critical race theory.
No. I'm going to disagree with you here.
Oh, you are?
It is under that umbrella because I don't. Of course, this is based on where I'm coming from, having been in the woke ideology, the social justice ideology. So the way in which I view it and the way in which I describe it is not everything we don't like is under woke. No, but and tell me what you think about this or if you disagree. Woke itself, social justice itself, is an ideology like an umbrella.
Yeah.
It's an ideology with a lot of different identity group things under it. And the reason they exist under it is because the ideology says the best way to look at the world is as a struggle for power between identity groups.
Yeah.
And, you know, an analogy would be Marxism, which I do believe it has roots in, but that's neither here nor there. There were people who will argue that. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Just use it as an analogy if you don't think it was born there. But you know, Marxism said the best way to look at the world is as a struggle for wealth between class groups. Well, this is about a struggle for power between identity groups.
Right.
And so
it's a neo-Marxian approach to things as
right.
well. So a bit
And
of
so
postmodernism.
Right. And so what they've done is they've amassed all these different movements for different identity groups under the umbrella, and
Hmm.
they've pulled them all under and corrupted them and co-opted them, and it's like the zombie thing I mentioned before. They're basically infiltrated these different identity group movements and have they all speak the woke language now. That's why you see take something like the uh, fat acceptance, the body acceptance movement, body
Hmm.
positivity movement. They've pulled that under there, where that's now an identity group. If you're overweight,
Hmm.
is an identity group, and they use the same language now about, if you're privileged or marginalized, and people of size are a marginalized group, and so all the same woke rules apply, and they're doing the same with mental health justice. Oh, if you have a mental health problem, that's an identity group suddenly, and you're a marginalized person. And so in that way, I will disagree with you, because I do think, well, here's where I agree. Yeah, to be very specific, I would say you could say, yeah, this is a critical race issue, but is critical race under the woke umbrella, the social justice umbrella? In my opinion, yes. So is queer theory. They've all been pulled underneath there.
Yeah, maybe I didn't explain myself properly.
Okay.
So yeah, I 100% agree.
Okay.
I guess that I'm very precise with the language, and I think
Right.
that's where and so that but that is an interesting. That's not to say I'm right, because that's what fascinates me about language. There is a colloquialism
Mhm.
use of terms, and then there's the more formal stuff. And I don't equate formal to the academic use. I think there's kind of a trifecta that goes on. Um, and so yes, so I think the average man on the street, or the way I kind of visualize it in my head is, someone's come back from work, picked up the kids, and they just want to, have listened to a bit of maybe a podcast on the way home in the car from picking the kids up. They come home, and that's pretty much, or they might turn on, the news or something. That's pretty much their extent of their exposure to this stuff.
Mhm.
So when they see something, they might just turn around and go, "Oh, that's woke." And I guess where I push back is from my position of going, yes and no. Yes, as a kind of pejorative catch-all colloquialism, yes, it's woke, but actually it's specifically this. And I guess from my point of view, if I am going to do my job in explaining it, I need to be precise with the language.
So we agree, I mean, it sounds like we
Yeah,
agree.
I'm
You're
just
just
going
talking
around.
about getting specific. Yeah. But I
Exactly.
do
Yeah.
I just brought that up because I really, well, I fundamentally see all those things as all these different identity groups under the woke umbrella as related, in terms of how these movements get co-opted, and they start using the same language and the same rules, and then within their groups, like if you're in one of the body positivity groups, those got totally taken over by woke ideology, so much so that they now have all the same language rules and everything in those groups. And you can't join if you're not a person of size, because you have power as a group. As a skinny person, you have skinny privilege, and you have, you know
And you're
and
an
it
outcast if you
yeah,
dare to do anything to go against that.
to change your identity. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, they kick people out if they lose weight,
Yeah.
even if they're not trying to lose weight. I've
Yeah.
seen people in that movement who are like, "I don't know what happened. I was in a group of fat acceptance, and then somebody in the group called me out, and they were like, 'You look like you've lost a little bit of weight in your recent photo.'" It's like, Did I? I wasn't trying to." And they're like, "I don't think you can be in the group anymore. You're a person of power now. You've lost 5 pounds. Like, it's no longer your identity."
It's
Um,
insane. Like the way I visualize it, it's like a family tree. You've got the
yeah.
same bloodline for everything, and the top is yes, woke or social justice ideology or neo-Marxian postmodernism, whatever we want to use that term is. But everything underneath, as you say, and as you go down, like it branches out more and more and
Oh,
more
yeah.
and more.
It's a
And
huge beast.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it won't be destroyed. I'm afraid it won't be destroyed. It'll evolve. And I just think it'll just become, to use one of their words, it'll become marginalized to an extent. But I think it'll always be there to some extent. I think, unfortunately, we will come to a point where, as everything does, I think we will absorb some of it into society. But I think I think it'll dilute further and further.
I like the way you're thinking of it then. I do think it'll be, again, this is about the specificity of language and semantics, I guess, because I like to talk about how do we destroy it. But I think you're right in that it'll always have a heartbeat. I do see it becoming marginalized, to use one of their
Yeah.
words. And sort of this, I hope it goes back, and I think it will go back to being a fringe ideology until it revives in a different way, because it's always been there. This is, for those of us who can see its roots in Marxism, um, it'll come back in a different way down the road, and it'll have like in a horror film, it'll be the virus is,
It's dormant.
it's dormant, and and then there'll be a sequel where oh no, somebody let the virus out of the
Someone finds a cave and moves a rock, and there's like a cobweb
and you're
covenant
like,
of like
no.
Robin DiAngelo or something. They open it
Yeah.
up and like,
No, don't open the Robin DiAngelo box. What are you doing? Don't bring it back.
I think I see it now. I think that should be a great little comedy short. I think it should be.
Yeah. So I
but
want to ask you
yeah.
before we get too far afield, and we haven't gotten to talk about this yet specifically. Um, Tell me a little bit about what you're doing with Wokescreen, the purpose of Wokescreen, and I want to talk to you about art. About you have this background in photojournalism and music and concert photography and being a creative person. I want to talk about the function of art and the importance of art in a woke world.
Yeah, so Wokescreen, I mean, it started life in, when was it? It would have been late 2021. And again, Glenn, who I don't know whether he's here, he's probably busy, I'm not entirely sure. But him and I were talking. I was explaining to him all these ideas I have. Like, I'm a little ideas factory. I've got like a notebook of just things that might never manifest, but I just come up with everything. And I had like this list of all of these different ideas and stuff like that. And I was explaining to him about it because he was at the point where I was prior to 2020. He was at the point where he was like paying attention to the news, but wasn't politically active as such, I don't think. And so he knew there was something a bit odd, but it wasn't until I was going like a crazy person to him, going, this means
Mhm.
this means that. And he was like, well, it sounds like it's just or no, I think I said to him, I said, it's a smoke screen for something completely different. It's just all of these things are a smoke screen for what the actual goal is. And he said, well, it sounds like a woke screen. And that was
Yeah.
where the name came from. And I was like, wow, that's really good. And so anyway, so what I wanted to do with Wokescreen is I truly believe that in our capacity as commentators and things, I think we can only do so much. And I think our job is signposting and keeping the flame alive of the conversation. But I do believe that it's creatives that will ultimately land the death blow on anything.
Mhm.
Because this is a cultural revolution.
Yeah.
And I think that we need a creative countercultural revolution.
Yes.
That's what we need. And so I am amassing an army of culture warriors, and I want to give a place for people that are, disaffected artists, any discipline, to meet together around Wokescreen. So there's a lot of different bits of it, right? So it's a little bit like woke in terms of it's got a little umbrella and all that stuff. But so you've got Wokescreen as the general brand, and then you've got Crowdsource, which is my kind of news and editorial content, and that's kind of like talking about the topics, the woke topics and things. Then we've got Wokesplain, which is going to be something I'm going to be building out, but it's going to be doing a lot of this about very digestible content for people that aimed at having nuanced topics that I don't want people to read my content and know where I politically sit. I want to be able to head over and give it to people, and so that they can turn around and be like, wow, okay, wow, I don't know, what way this sits, but this is just factual information.
Mhm.
I want to give them the facts and they can digest it. I don't want to tell them what to think. And so that's what I want to do with Wokesplain, but I also want to build it out. There's a lot more exciting stuff that's going to be coming with that hasn't been done elsewhere. That's really exciting. then we got which will probably be more of the creative stuff that I think you guys will be interested, which is culture jam. I'm a big fan of culture jamming. So if anyone that doesn't know what culture jamming is a technique where you jam culture. You basically go against the culture and you put things in to kind of disrupt stuff and be a bit subversive with stuff. And so I want to do that. And we're doing it in tandem with Just Listen to This, which is the music website we have. So we're going to be doing a lot of that. If you're a musician, there's going to be options where you can submit your stuff for review and interviews and stuff. We're going to be doing
very cool.
podcasts. Yeah, it's going to be so fun. We have lots of big names on Just Listen. So many big names that come to us for reviews and interviews as well. And we've been very lucky. We're quite high up on the list of music websites in the UK, independent music websites. We've been going since 2014, and we get a lot of exclusives. But what's nice is you'll get the big acts alongside the smaller acts. The big acts like it because they're there with a bit of fresh blood, and they're kind of up and pushing ahead and having to keep their quality up. But then,
Are you familiar with the band? It's a UK band, Whom by Fire.
No, I'm not.
Oh, I need to put you in touch with them. I just interviewed them a couple of weeks ago. They were the ones who they're friends with my friend and another artist, Bertie Rose, the famous artist Bertie
Oh yeah.
Rose. They got canceled from a festival they were booked at there in the UK, like the week of.
Oh.
And I have to put you in touch with them. They were told it was just because they had that some of their online posts were not in keeping with the values of the festival. They weren't told which posts. They weren't given the chance to rebut they were just axed from a festival they had been promoting and had taken
What
time off
festival
to
was it?
perform at. It's one of those British words. I can't. Oh no, it's Lee Arts. It was the Lee Arts Festival.
Oh, it wasn't the Shirty Festival, being a British.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna do that afterwards. Let me connect you with them.
Definitely. So that's what Culture Jam is. I really want to have that as a focus on culture. And I was saying to Mikey, I said, maybe he can come on and do his rundown of movies to see for the month. What he's watching, and then Glenn can come on and say, what you should be listening to and stuff like that. So I really want to bridge that gap there. And then we're going to have, and then we have, what Wokescreen is with the Culture Warriors. So we've got the memberships on there, and a little bit of inside baseball with the business operations of things. I'm an oversharer, but it's okay. It's nothing confidential. But it's so I was really frustrated because as much as I love Locals and Substack, it was really driving me insane because for every $5 that of hardworking people's money that they were giving me, they would end up taking 12.9% plus 30 cents for each $5 transaction. And it's like, okay. And I understand the purpose of those platforms. They're very good out of the box things if you don't know how to build or maybe you just don't want to, you're not too fussed. But me being a bit of a perfectionist and a control freak, I was like, well, I'm a web designer as well. So I was like, I'm just going to build my own membership website. So I'm now doing everything through Wokescreen. And yeah, we had when was it? It was last Friday. We had our first games night, and that was an absolute riot. That was so fun. So we'll have games night, and I want to grow that out into so we have supporters. We'll have a league table, and at the end of the year they'll win a prize or something. So I want to build that out. But yeah, it's bringing a community together. And then one of the most important things that I'm doing with this that's pertaining to creatives is if you are a paid member, supporter, if you're a monthly supporter, you have to do 3 billing cycles, but you become a culture warrior. So if you're creating art, let's say, but you don't want to pay the ridiculous fees that Etsy are charging you, or you don't want to create your own store, or you're just not producing enough work that justifies you doing it, well, then we'll host it on ours and sell it through our site, and we'll do it for a commission. And then if you're an annual member, it's even better because an annual membership works out actually cheaper than doing the monthly by the monthly. But if you do the annual one, you get 100% of your profits that you've made on that. So there's no commission split. It's just you get whatever you've made on that minus obviously the cost of the production. So it's really just trying to harbor and also connect people with multidisciplines. So if you've got an artist, so Adrian, I think I saw you guys interacting on Twitter the other day. She does the stained glass, and
Okay.
absolutely incredible. In fact, I don't know whether you can see, but can you see the lamp behind me on the shelf?
Let's
It's a little
often
bit blown
see.
out. It's a little bit blown out. Let me
Not
see.
really, but move your hand.
No, I'm trying to block the light a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, that thing behind me. Um,
Uh,
it's absolutely incredible. So when I was in Vietnam, they had this really crazy like these lighting things on the street, and I was like, wow, it looks really cool. They were like tortoiseshell thing. And I was like, wow, could you create like a lamp? And she made that for me and sent it over, and I love her stuff. Absolutely love her stuff. So she's going to be creating stuff as well and selling it exclusively on the store. But the point is that if there's an artist that, so for example, I'm verbal diarrheaing, so stop me if I'm rambling. But as a photographer, one of the things that I like to do, being that I also shoot with film and stuff, I play with a lot of chemicals. So there's this really cool thing called liquid light, liquid emulsion. And so it's like wax, and it's the same, like back in the day when you'd go in a dark room and you'd have the photosensitive paper and it'd have to be in a red light. Well, that chemical layer, you can get it in an actual block of just solid material, and you put it in a like water bath to sort of melt, and you can paint it onto any material you want, and that material becomes light sensitive. So back in the day, I actually painted it on my hand. Probably, I'm surprised my hand didn't fall off, but I printed pictures on my hands. I also printed on glass, which is a really incredible thing to do. But for example, I could collaborate with Adrian to print one of my pictures on one of her stained glass. So it's all about building this thing and
Connections. Yeah,
exactly.
I
And where
love it.
people are free to be themselves.
So I'll plug it below. If you guys look in the description, Kieran is offering if you are interested, if you go to wokescreen.com and you're interested in joining, he has a discount there's a code there for deprogram people. So just grab that in the description if you're interested. Um,
And that won't
and
expire either. That's permanent discount.
woohoo! I want to thank you, John Thomas, for the super chat for the $10. Thanks for supporting the channel. He says, oh, and also giving me a recommendation. Keri, a young artist and potential guest, Patty Gurdy. She plays a traditional hurdy-gurdy, but plays rock, metal, folk, Celtic, just all kinds. She also advocates for men's mental health. Thank you
Wow.
so much for that. I'm taking a note of her name. I appreciate it, John. Couple of other, let me just look through here. Couple of other things in the chat. Sophia says, if you haven't joined Wokescreen, you should. Hey, Sophia. And Pirate Tomsky, who was here earlier and had to take off, says, magnetize your mouse towards the like button. That's when you were talking about magnets. Here's where you can check out Kieran, all of Kieran's links, find him online.
Bless you all.
This link tree from Cheeky's got that in the chat if you guys want to find the links, or it's wokescreen.com. And okay, that's it. That's enough of the break, I think. Can I just show you something? This is
Sure.
speaking of the importance of art and creativity. I really believe creativity, like you, I agree. Creativity, this is a culture war. And so a huge part of pushing back is culture, is changing the culture
Yeah.
with creatives. And we see so many people doing that in the past year or two, and so many examples of success that people can look at for inspiration, say, I'm going to follow that. We have Drunk 3PO's got a book out now that's doing amazing. Eric July, launching his own comic book company and series that's just doing gangbusters over the traditional comic books companies. And so there's a lot of examples you can look to now to say, Epic Mike and Josiah Rises, who have their own production company that they're doing with original series and films. So
Right.
there's all these people who are saying, look, I'm going to figure out a way to do this, and I'm going to create my art. You've got artists like Birdie Rose, who I mentioned, who's selling her stuff online. You've got all the knitters in the chat. I saw there was a comment here of Tina has a yarn color named for you, named Wokescreen,
Yes.
a play on Wokescreen.
I
And
should have brought it over. I've got my hat over there, but it's like it's about it's like hell in here. It's so hot, so I didn't put it on.
oh
But
yeah.
it's funky.
Well, if people want to go and buy that yarn from Tina's shop, there's the link, and a portion of it benefits Wokescreen. But I just love all these different kinds of creators coming together, and
I like the organic creativity. That's the
yes,
thing. And I won't name names, but there is a lot of corporate creativity,
yeah,
and I find that there's a lot of there's no other way of me saying this without sounding like a really shitty person, but I'll just say it anyway, and you can judge. But there's a lot of people that aren't creative that have found that actually maybe it might be a nice money vessel, and they've decided to just do it because they have the money to do it. So whereas creatives don't have the money to necessarily do stuff, these other people do, but it becomes very corporate and plasticky and things like that. So I really love the
yeah. Well,
organic.
people can smell that, like, inauthenticity and stuff. So, but in terms of creatives, like, I truly believe, like, sometimes on this show, and what we do is we talk about what's in the news, we talk about culture, we talk about what's on our minds. But it's also just providing a fellowship, a community, a place for people to come, like on a lot of uh, channels these days, where you come and you're hanging out with like-minded individuals. You may not agree on particular policies, or you might not have the same exact political point of view, but you've got a place where you're like, hey, we all know, we can see what's happening in culture. We can see this weird time in history that we happen to be living through. And how do you survive and get through it? And how do you remain positive and joyful and not let the fight against woke take over your life? And
Yeah.
how do you have fun? And for me, that's not just a question of how do I stay sane, but it's also, to me, that gets to how do we even fight woke? I think the most important thing we do is just we live a good life. You live a good life. You create things. Human beings were designed. I'm a religious person. I believe we have a creator, and we were designed to create like the creator. And so that's what I think we do. And can I show you something real quick?
Sure.
Okay. So I put up something on Friday where I was like, just show me some of your creations. Like, what are people working on? And I was blown away on Twitter and Facebook. Just people sharing all this cool stuff they're doing and things I had no idea. I learned about, like, some of my friends on Facebook. I didn't even know you did, music, or what. People were sharing all this stuff. So, whether it's home renovation, I have a picture there of our bedroom as it's evolving, as we're working on it. We still have to do, I'm not pleased yet because we haven't added the quarter rounds around the wall there, and we've got some other things to do, but we're working on it. And so if you scroll through here, people started sharing all this stuff they're doing.
That's Adrian. Yeah.
Yeah, Adrian, who's in the chat. There's her Tiffany lamp. There's people sharing their gardening, like Horror Emirata, which I mean, that's the most fundamental kind of creating, is to grow things, like actually grow things. And so she's got her season's first zucchini there. All the time it takes to go into, like, cultivating something beautiful and also something edible,
And
something you can use.
that's pushing back against the cultural control as well. If you're in control of what you're eating and stuff like that, then you're on good grounds.
Yeah, look at this
Oh,
one. I just saw this one this morning. This looks like something from a magazine. This is Joan Knuckles Wilson. She's like, "Oh, this is my guest room I've been working on. It's ready for my guests, and this is the view." That looks like something out of a fairy tale storybook.
Wow, I'll have to check my calendar to see when I'm coming out. Wow.
Joan, when can we come stay with you?
Yeah, I've been looking for a home away from home.
I mean, look at this. Look at that guest room.
You know what I love as well is just the greenery out the window as well.
Yeah. Incredible. Incredible. Oh, wait, I just have a few more because here's some of the knitters here. Three of me is like, oh, here are three. Oh, no big deal. Here's three knitting projects I'm working on. What? These are just beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we've got guns. This guy's like, here's two guns I've built recently, two ARs. The time it takes to do that, I know, is no joke. We've got it looks like pastel
Yep.
artwork here, and this person.
I
Oh, right,
yeah.
Granny Panties, who's doing drawings of different culture warriors.
She's updated them now. I think she started applying the color, and
Oh,
they're
that's
looking
fantastic.
incredible.
Uh, oh, and then this one, I just love the colors here
Oh,
on
yeah.
this. There's a lot of knit ones here in the comments, but yeah. Anyway, I'll stop showing these. I was just impressed with not just the quality of the work, but the range of work. Because there's also people like this who are saying, here's what I've been spending my time creating. Look at my peppers. I'm pickling
Oh,
stuff. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's just it makes me so happy. So
yeah.
thanks for letting me take over a little bit of your interview with sharing other people's
No, no,
creations.
no. I'm no. This is what I love, and I don't know about you, but I'm sometimes more in awe of people when they create things that I know that are outside of my talent wheelhouse.
Oh
Like
yeah.
and it just yeah, it's I think that some people there's a group of people that I don't know whether it's with creativity or creatives, but like in other disciplines, if you see someone doing something incredible that you can't do, I think the natural reaction for most people is a bit of jealousy. But with creative stuff, for me, it's just awe, and I'm like, wow.
Let me interrupt you. I don't think it's a natural reaction to have jealousy. I think if that is your natural reaction, you're living in a dark place. Like
Mm,
it is a human reaction, yes, but this goes back to the two different ways of living. It's in Christianity, for example, it's the view of, are you living like Cain? Are you living like Abel? Are you living in the flesh? Are you living in the spirit? Um, if you have that natural reaction, it could just be your flesh rising up and you're like, "Oh, I recognize what that is," and you put it to bed, you say a prayer
mm.
about it, what have you. But if you're actually living in that place all the time where it's
Oh
just
yeah,
your natural reaction upon seeing
yeah.
friends succeeding or people that you like doing something good, if your natural reaction is one of envy, that there's something wrong. Um,
Yeah.
I
I
say
guess
that.
what I meant is like in a competitive situation,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
at work, like when there's like, competitive things happening, then that's kind of like that's sort of the industry. But yeah, I agree. Like if your natural reaction is to constantly be jealous of everything that everyone's doing, then you're living a pretty sad life.
Right, and this is where I make my Jesus pit okay.
As an
Jesus can
atheist,
cure that, Kieran.
I'll let you have it as an atheist. It's okay.
I'm gonna get you. Okay, I'm just kidding with you. Kieran, thank you for letting me talk to you about all this stuff today,
No,
and
it has been an absolute pleasure.
yeah, I've really enjoyed talking with you. As I said at the beginning, a lot of people love your British accent, and I saw some people in the chat were like, "Kieran can read the phone book, and it's good." Um,
Oh, 7, 7, 4, 5.
ah,
Yeah.
you sound like HG Tudor.
Well, I'm not really H.G. Tudor, but if you buy my stuff on narcissism, then you too can find out about the narcissist.
I actually, there's probably 10% of me that thinks you might actually be HG Tudor.
I tell you what, if that opens up a can of worms that I don't even want to entertain. Maybe when the camera ends.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let me plug it again. So if you guys want to check out Wokescreen, it's wokescreen.com. I've got the link here somewhere. It's also below in the description. Where is it? Robert, can you throw it in there again? Give it up for Robert Lowry, one of our mods today, and Cheeky, who had to take off, Two Sisters and Some Yarn, who was here, and Pirate Tomsky. Thank you guys for helping out. But Robert, if you're still around, put that link in here and I'll put it up again because I lost it. But it's all below in the description. If you're listening to this later, check out the description for links to Wokescreen. And if you want to get in touch with Kieran, there's ways to follow him online. Um, what's some final parting words, a final thought you would leave us with?
um, No, I can't say that on air. No, no. I think I guess what I would say is these aren't words. This is a bit of a spiel. But I was I was going to say very quickly that the whole thing with Wokescreen is really to bring people together, because I think that everybody has been fractured beyond repair. Well, no, not beyond repair, but I think people have fundamentally changed, and that's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it is where we are. I don't think you can go through all of this or know the things we know now with not being slightly changed by things and being a slightly different person. But yeah, it's just come along to Wokescreen. And what's nice is usually at the end of these things, I go and follow me on here, and then I go, and then there's all these different places, and I usually have to give a tourist map out to people of go and follow me here. But just head over to Wokescreen. What's nice is I have a calendar function on there where I list all of the upcoming events. So any streams I'm going to be on, any streams I'm doing, community events. Like for example, so Saturday we have the Crowdsourced podcast, which is talking about news and current events. And I try and zoom out. I try and take things that are in the the public zeitgeist with things, but I like to look at the bigger picture of things and take the temperature down. That's at 10:30 Eastern in the morning. So we have that. And then on Sunday, we have a members-only community call, and that is at 1:30 Eastern. And then every second Friday of the month, we have a community games night. And it's really good fun. There's going to be a whole lot. So stay tuned. If you don't want to sign up now, there's two things you can do. You can join on the website as a free member. And what that does is that automatically puts you onto the mailing list. I don't spam. I very rarely send an email out. But there's going to be new things coming. So if you want to be the first to hear, get onto that. But yeah, just keep creating and keep pushing back and focus on the things that make you happy, because you and yourself need to be happy before you can even go out there and do anything. It's the whole thing, right? Of
heal thyself.
Exactly. I cannot help anybody else until I myself helped.
Yeah,
I made that up to make it sound good, but
no, live the things you believe. Your what you believe should be evident in your behavior and the way you live your life, so that you wouldn't even have to say words if you didn't want to.
Exactly. But yeah, we're here, and we are starting the creative countercultural revolution.
Yeah.
So
I love it. Well, thank you, Kieran. Thank you guys for hanging out with us in the Deprogrammed chat today. And thank you for supporting the show. And if you like it, hit like. We've got a couple of, here we go. Two sisters and some yarn. You know what's twiddling? Y'all's fingers hitting the like button. Get to cracking. I don't know why I gave her a Southern accent, but there you go. And
I must say as well, if you do join up as a member through the discount code, 10% is going to Keri as a commission to Keri. So it supports.
Thank you very much.
Well.
That's very kind of you. Okay, guys. I appreciate hanging out with you. We had a fun Monday. Mystery Chris is coming over to my haunted house, and we're gonna work on some stuff with the channel today. I'm very excited, so I gotta get running. But I'll see you on Wednesday for a live pop culture at 8 Central. And Kieran, I wish you
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So much to talk about, so little time, but we got through a lot on this stream.
We did. And it was fun. Okay.
All right.
I'm gonna go then.
Bye all.